So welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here for week 2 in building the Weaver train station, so stay tuned. Alright, so we are back to build the Weaver train station. You know, we got a good start on it in last week's video. We need to continue on with building the walls in this video and see how far up we can come with that. That one wall that overhangs the lower wall where the platform is, underneath there's a little, you know, an alcove or whatever you want to call it that sticks out. I guess it was the ticket office. I really don't know. I can't see any signs or wording or anything on it. But a lot of train stations had that, and most of them it was a type of a ticket office where you could order tickets from the outside of the building versus going inside the building. So we have that thing to figure out and how we're going to build that onto the lower floor. And you know, we need to come back and start scratch building some of these windows. I did not have you know, I couldn't find to order the right size windows for this, and you know, it only has one pane over one pane. It's not multiple panes, so it's not that hard to scratch build. When you get into, you know, 6 by 6 panes over panes, that gets tedious to get all the little tiny mullions in place and lined up to where everything looks right. But these shouldn't be that bad to do, so I'm just going to scratch build all these windows. And I like having my walls, each one of them prepped before I start putting the whole building together, because once you start doing that, it gets harder to get in there and work on the windows and doors. You know, and some of the doors there, again, we got to scratch build. You know, a lot of the freight doors, I'm just going to scratch build them. I could find something that was close to what was there, but it's not hard to build the doors. So, you know, I'm going to get into some of that too. So let's just jump into this and see how far we can get in this video. Now, I showed these pictures in the last video and told you why I came up with the decisions I did for the stucco area and the, you know, the clapboard siding on the lower part of the first wall and then this whole second floor. And you know, the paint schemes did change over the years, and the era that I really model is past the point of this building's existence. So I tried to go ahead and choose some of the latter style of painting that existed on this building. And you know, I've got to eyeball windows and stuff because I have no measurements really for this. So, you know, I'm just going to jump into building walls. And this is how we left the end walls in the last video. You know, this was the one end that I just have that tiny blown up picture of, and this is the other end that I do have good pictures of. And the door is slightly different from the original, and at one time I see solid doors, and another period of time I see, you know, windows in doors. So now the next step is to start on the long walls. And this is the lower wall that is underneath of where that the overhang is. And I just went through and kind of laid out where the doors and everything would have been on that. Remember, there's an area that steps out from this where the ticket sales area is there in the middle. So I left that as a 12-foot wide section. And after I cut the doors out, I'm going to come back and, you know, glue these two pieces together with some bracing so that I have one solid wall versus a top and bottom to the wall. And I just glue these scrap pieces of wood in between the two, and, you know, far enough away from the doors and stuff that it's not going to really mess me up when gluing anything else together. And then, you know, I had pre-cut the second floor wall in the last video, so you know, now I have these two walls, and they do not connect between the floors, because remember, this steps out. So I had mentioned that I wanted to keep this section here 12 feet wide where it steps out from the building. But I'm going to go ahead and cut out a section of that back here and then build out from that so that, you know, there's an access back into the building from this area. I could just paint this black really, but you know, this is just the way I chose to do it. And then I just come back and start putting paint on everything, you know, 2 coats on the clapboard, and I'll show you the stucco area here in a minute, but on the other side of this, I went ahead and laid the other side out, and the top and bottom do connect on this floor. So, I do this in the same process as I did the other side of the building. I come back and mark the lower floor, cut all the windows and doors out of this, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put bracing behind it to connect all the pieces. And since this is one wall, I can go ahead, connect bracing clear up through the second floor and connect all of this together as one solid wall. So it gives me, one complete wall top to bottom besides the ends that is together. And then I just need to come back and, put paint on this as well as, the other sides. And, I'm going to just kind of explain the stippling effect a little bit. What I do is I use an old, really stiff brush that the bristles on the end have been, flattened and mashed out. And, what I do, instead of stroking paint onto the wood, is I dab it on the area. And this starts pulling up some of the burgundy paint off that mat board, and some of it shows through because it's a much darker color, so I'm going to have to do, a couple different coats of this. And I end up, when you paint the wood too, you need to just use strokes that are in parallel to the board so it doesn't look odd when it's painted. But after, doing a second coat, it still pulled a little bit of color, and there were still some real thin areas. So I ended up coming back and just touching up a third coat that wasn't a full coat. But basically you can see how this gave me the texture of the stucco in that wall compared to the clapboard siding. So after, painting both the sides of the walls, we now have all the walls made except for putting windows and doors in them for the whole building. So, now comes putting the windows in, the doors in, and all of that. But, there is one other part to that wall under that overhang that we got to, figure out. And what I did was I drew out this drawing here to figure out how I was going to make it. And remember I had said I wanted this 12 feet wide. And I played around with having this stick out 3 foot from the building, but it really eats up too much of that walkway. So what I'm going to do is make this stick out 2 feet from the building. And at either side of that 12 foot, then I come back and just use an angle and put 45-degree angles on that, and then draw a line where the face of that is across the front. And then I measure those, and that gives me the widths of my wall. And from the platform to the roof will give me the height of this. So basically I have the measurements. Now I got to go through my stuff and find windows and doors to work out the size of the openings I can have to cut in this. But now I know the sizes of all that wood, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that and make this protrusion and add it onto that wall. So what I decided to use was this 1/32 inch basswood for this, because it's good and solid, a little more beefy than say balsa wood. And I just went ahead and cut those 3 panels for the outside of that wall. And I decided, okay, where they meet is kind of odd angles, so I'm going to go ahead and take my sander and sand back the outside edges to 45s. I went through my windows, and the most narrow window I have are these here, and I don't really have anything for the center pane, so I just decided that I'm going to go ahead and scratch build these windows the same as the rest of the windows in the building. So I just marked out the measurements of where all those windows would be. And then during the time I was doing this too, I was cutting the top and bottom panels that this would all glue into. And I cut them to 12-foot length and came back and trimmed them to where the width of the panel on the outside of those as well. And cut all those windows out, and now I have basically all my panels ready to glue into that. Now the front wall, I found out, I had put 45s on it too, and the width of that was just a little wide, and with the 45s at a 45-degree angle to the building, I needed flat walls on the side, so I cut those angles off the front panel, and then glued these pieces together to form that section that needs to be added to that building. And once I have the bottom in place, while this is still kind of soft glue, I went ahead and worked with the top one as well, because I wanted to have a little bit of movement in the wood. And if I had waited till that bottom was totally set up glue-wise, it'd been hard maybe to manipulate this top. But once I glue both those in, I basically have the center panel of this to work on that building. And I didn't put clapboard siding on the bottom. I don't have a good picture of this, but by the looks of it, I'm not sure that it had clapboard siding. So with all the trim on there, I just decided to go ahead and paint this white, and we'll just add trim to all this to make that work out. Now the trim for all the windows and doors, I'm going to use this one before for the outside trim and the inside, because it's the same thickness as the wood and the fiberboard that I'm using for the walls. I decided originally to use this 1x6 for the windowsills at the bottom. So I just went ahead and just pre-painted the burgundy on all of the 1x6s and 1x4s, and decided to come back and I'm just going to start trimming out all the windows. And door openings as well. The small doors don't need it, but the baggage doors will need it. So I just took this 1x6 and just each opening I'm going to do individually, because they're not all exactly the same, so I can't pre-cut all these. So I come through and just go ahead and add those to the bottom of the walls. And I just, I got anxious, so I did paint a door and get one door in there. I'm just going to go ahead and work on these two end walls to begin with, so I get the windowsills in both these end walls in place. And I just come back and add that 1x4 to the inside of that whole opening, which you can see here. Then I find the center point of all the upright sides of these windows. And remember, these are one pane over one pane, and I'm going to take this 2x4 here and put a piece of this in the center of each one of those windows to give me the one pane over one pane. So I just come back on both those end walls and I go ahead and add those into the centers of each of those windows, trying to get even spacing above and below. Now, when I first started building these, I was going to use this 20x20 styrene and go ahead and make inside trim to the windows where the mullion or the glass would set back into, so the front pane would be slightly outside of the inner lower pane, because they would slide up and down to give ventilation to the building. So I came back and started working with these and putting the first piece in place for that, and I don't know that you're really going to notice that much of a difference from the outside of the building, so I just decided to scrap that plan. Now the freight doors on all these, you can see them here, and they're double doors. They're not a single door that would have hinged. So with all the doors that I have, I need a total of 4 of these doors. So I come through and scribe, measure out the panels so they're slightly wider than the openings. And I scribe board lines in these at a 45 so that the center of the door, both sides of this, go up to the outside edge of the door. And I'm just gluing these on paper to make them easier to work with as single units, and I come back and cut those out. And I'm going to trim the bottom of these so they're nice and square and flush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put some white paint on these. And I think since I'm going to glue these, oversized behind the door opening, I'm just going to come back and put the trim on all these once I have them glued into place. And you saw one door in there earlier, and I figured, well, while I'm working on doors, I'm going to go ahead and take these last 2 Tichy doors that I have like this, and I'm going to paint them to match the, all the rest of the trim and doors on the building. So I have these doors ready to mount in the walls. And that one odd door on the very back side of the building, I don't have another 6-pane window, but this would have been a back entrance to the building. So I thought, well, later on there weren't window panes in the doors. And I thought, well, on this back side, I'm just going to go ahead and do this 6-panel door as a back entrance to the building. So that gives me my 4 regular walk-in doors. Now, you saw that one door mounted in this panel earlier on, but now I'm going to come back, and since the inside walls of all those openings are wrapped, I'm going to go ahead and use this one before and continue to wrap the openings. And I'm going to do this with, all those door openings, at least that was my plan originally. But basically, this is all that trim on that door. And then I go through and, just go ahead and start adding and putting paint on different things. And I went ahead and painted those center posts and these windows and these panels here and decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and just start mounting the doors. So this, I just glue these in place behind the panel. And then I'm going to come back and start adding the trim that make these individual doors. So I put a 1x6 at the top, and I cut it in half, remember, because there are 2 doors and I don't want a single piece up there. And the same with the bottom. I do the same thing down there, and that's the 1x6 on the top and bottoms of the doors. And then in the center of this, instead of using a 1x6, I'm going to use a 1x4, and I got to put one separate piece on each side to make this 2 doors. So there's a slot down the middle where the doors meet. Now remember, these were paneled doors, and there's a slightly smaller panel at the top than the bottom. So I come back with the 1x6 then, and I add this center piece in there to give me the differences in the 2 doors. And while I've got these other doors ready to go, I just come back and start mounting these in some of these other walls. This is that wall under that overhang, and it has these 2 walk-in doors. And then I trim out and put the freight doors in place behind those panels there, so I can go ahead later and come back and finish framing those out. And that other panel that I made for the front of this, I go ahead and mount on the front of that wall. So basically, other than putting trim and stuff on all this, that's basically that wall in place. And the only other 2 doors that get mounted in this building are on this back side. I have that back entrance door that goes onto a little porch, and then I have this freight door here that I go ahead and glue behind the wall, even though I didn't get trim on it. And basically at this point, we have all of this to this point. The walls are starting to come along, the foundation's done, so I'm thinking maybe in the next video I can get all the rest of the trim and the framing done on this and maybe start putting some walls on the foundation. So there you have this week's segment of the Weaver train station. This is coming along pretty well. At the end of the second video, I am getting really busy in my nursery life and the plant world. So I don't know how quick this is going to proceed from here on out, but I'll try to get as much time in on this each week as I can get on it. But I like the looks of where this is going. It's going to be a nice looking building when it's done. And it was quite a unique little railroad station. I don't know of a whole lot around the country that were built exactly like this. And I like working with wood, so this has been a real fun project to get into. And everything is working out pretty well. I haven't had a whole lot of problems with this. The mullions on the insides of those windows, because in windows there's one that sits out beyond the other, so it can slide up and down to provide ventilation for the building. And originally I had started cutting all those little plastic pieces to add in there and be able to do that, and I just decided I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to glue, the clear styrene on these windows the way I normally do with most windows. It's not a big deal to me. If you're a perfectionist, you can go ahead and finish that process and add the windows inside out on any windows that you're scratch building. Even in some of the ones that come in kits, especially Walters kits and some of the other kits that aren't as finely detailed, a lot of the glass is just glued behind, and it doesn't have that. The frame may look like it's done that way, but typically the styrene glass is not glued into it to that point to make it actually be that way. Now on some of the finer kits, yes, they are that way. And the Teachy windows, when you buy those, they have individual cut panes, and theirs are molded that way, and they will work that way. But since I'm scratch building this, I'm just not going to take the time. With all the windows in this building, it would take me a whole lot of time to come back and do that, and I'm not going to do that. You know, unless you're really, really looking up close and personal at this, you'll never ever notice the difference in it anyway. You know, one of these days, maybe I'll build a building and you know, I thought about it before about taking everything to the next level. You know, I mean, these buildings that I build are better than Tyco or plastic built buildings. But there are a lot of people out there that with the weathering and everything they do get slightly more realism in the buildings they build. And you know, I can do that. I just choose not to in most of the things that I do. And most of the buildings that I have done in the past, I've never really got into a lot of the weathering. When it comes down to it in the end and I get ready to mount them on my model railroad eventually, I will do a lot of the weathering and stuff and taking that to the next level to bring a little more realism to these buildings as well. But you know, I always say, you know, I want something that has the flavor of, you know, when you look at it, you look at a picture of the original building and say, well, that's that building. You know, it represents what I'm trying to make it represent. So in any case, it's all about scratch building, you know. Get some materials. You don't have to buy them, but you can just get materials. You know, a lot of freebies out there. You can even get paper buildings online free in a lot of places and experiment with paper buildings if you want to and mount them on board and do that way. And you can make those somewhat three-dimensional too if you play with those. And maybe one of these days I'll do one of those to give you an idea of what you can do with some of those. But in any case, it's all about having fun with your model trains. Happy model railroading.